was Unite the Kingdom an Islamophobic rally? Piers Morgan seems to think so.
I was happy to be among the crowd of the Unite the Kingdom march. I found it very enjoyable.
Did you feel you were amongst like-minded souls there, Jonathan?
I felt that I was amongst patriots. I mean, they are, yeah. I saw a lot of British patriots. I saw a lot of people who were marching with their own flags and being proud and happy to live in a free, democratic society.
When you saw one of the speakers do this, Kelly Jean King, let's look at this.
It's not too late to get Islam out of that building. It is not too late to get Islam out of every single official office in this country.
You feel comfortable now you've seen that? That's one of the speakers at the event.
Well, she didn't say Muslims, did she? She specifically said Islam. And I think there's a very big difference here. Had she said Muslims, as in people with beliefs, I would have had
What
an
if she
issue.
said Jews or people who practice Judaism?
Well, she didn't say Jews, or she didn't say people.
You're splitting hairs, Jonathan.
No.
You know you are.
No, I'm not. And I think that's a
So
very
she said we've got to get Judaism out of every form of parliament,
Well, I don't
at
know
local,
that there
state
is.
level, national level of the country.
I don't know that there is any Jewish authority in British politics. I don't know that Jews exercise.
Well, there's no
that
Islam
level of
authority
power.
in British politics. Here's the thing.
We have religious
I just
freedom.
think somebody standing on a stage where you're in the crowd
Yeah.
and are proud to be there, happy to be there, no problem. Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a woman standing there who is just being blatantly Islamophobic in the most blatant, obvious, undeniable, uncontestable manner.
I think you're wrong, Piers, and I think that, I think you have to be a little bit more critical in the way that you're, happy to, with very broad strokes, paint something. And this is something that not only you do, lots of people do it, where anything where the root, the first letters of Islam is mentioned, there's this heightened sensitivity.
That's just
oh
nonsense.
Lord, please
That's
not say
serious.
As
anything
opposed to
against
Judaism and
let's
Jews
not say anything.
and Israel?
Well, you can see that they are the most targeted ethnic group in the UK
Jonathan, you're-
by far. We
quite-
can see that the hate crimes against Jews are beyond.
He's saying that Jewish people are the most targeted ethnic group in the UK. Are Jewish people an ethnic group? Are they a religion? That's something we can debate.
Beyond everything else, they are 10 times the amount of attacks against Muslims. So
That's complete
by
nonsense.
that
I think he means pro rata.
comparison, no,
Statistically,
that's
complete and
British
utter.
police.
That's a lie.
No,
That's just
that's
a lie.
British police
No,
statistics.
I mean, you're a professional liar. You're lying now.
By that number, you could make that assumption. But I think you're doing the same mistake here. That woman, who again, I don't know who she is, and I don't know where she comes from, but when she chose to say Islam, the religion, and not Muslims, I think that's it.
What do you think she
that's
meant
a
then?
difference.
To keep Islam out of our body politic?
Well, I think she makes a point of having, keeping Britain British in the sense of that church is separated from power, something that you did about 900 years ago, and that you have religious freedom.
Why are you defending this, Jonathan? I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Jonathan, can
Why
I just
am
say...
I defending it?
Yes.
Because I believe, as someone who lives in the Middle East, and unlike perhaps you and others here, who don't yet understand the problems with institutional Islam, I think that you have yet, you don't really understand what's at stake here.
Can I
if you
can I-
let
am I going to be allowed to come in at any point?
Yeah, of course. If you let Islamists take over institutions, that is exactly what they will do, and they will use your system
But she didn't
against
say
you.
Islamist. She said
Okay.
Islam.
So first of all, I think, Jonathan, it's an extremely strange ship for you to want to go down with this. You could have easily just said, I condemn that, but
Yeah.
generally I didn't find that.
I thought you would.
I thought you would, actually,
No.
because I think you do a good impression of a reasonable
Because
person.
we all know if it had been at
come
the
on
other...
with the condescending nonsense.
Well,
But Jonathan, if it had been,
I'm thinking
if it had
exactly
been at the
the
other
same.
one and she said, I want Judaism removed from all political levels of the country,
Yeah.
you'd have gone nuts.
Yeah.
Rightly. I'd have agreed with you.
So he's making the argument that there's a difference between being against Islam and wanting to get rid of Islam from the country and wanting to get rid of Muslims. And then they're asking him, well, what if it was said about Judaism? Now, he already mentioned Jewish people as an ethnicity. Islam is not an ethnicity, and I don't think there's anyone that argues that it is. Let's have another clip from the same show.
So you'll be pleased to hear I don't think Jonathan is very fair-minded. We've debated before, Jonathan, on various shows. I think that it's very, very instructive and actually very useful that you openly say you line up with Tommy Robinson and his cohort. I think it's very useful because we get a transparent size of you when you say such a thing. And by extension, I think a good part of the Israeli body politic, I think you speak for a lot of them.
Could say the same thing about you marching with Hamas.
If the woman there, yeah, that's a complete
same thing.
nonsense analogy.
Why would that be the case?
If I'm not going to be
Hamas
direct,
was represented,
you like
you just
Jonathan,
you address me directly. If you will address me, I will address you back.
I will not interrupt you if you won't interrupt me. Otherwise, it's going to make a great mess for the audience.
Then
Listen, I haven't finished my point. I think you should let me finish.
Don't talk over each other.
I think you should let me finish my
If you
point.
can resist addressing me directly, then
If you want to just muddy the waters so that nobody can hear either of us, you're going to end up coming away like the pantomime villain. Let me finish my point.
the only villain here would be you. That's fine.
That's a
Again,
very...
if you refrain
Let him
from
finish his point,
from
Jonathan.
verifying me,
Let him finish his
Jonathan,
point.
Yeah,
you're
go
a grown
ahead.
man. Shut up and let...
So Unite the Kingdom, organised by Tommy Robinson, who is a well-known Zionist, describes himself as a Zionist and a hardcore supporter of Israel. There was actually someone at the march, a clip that's gone viral. I haven't got it with me, but someone from the far right, if you want to call them that, who was being very critical of not only Islam but also Judaism and making a lot of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic remarks on camera. And that was kind of an embarrassing moment for these Unite the Kingdom far-right types, because as much as they've aligned themselves with the State of Israel, it would seem that there are some anti-Semitic views within their ranks. We'll play a little bit more from this clip and then we're going to get some Tucker Carlson on soon.
I was happy to be among the crowd of the Unite the Kingdom march. I found it very enjoyable.
That's enough of him. We've seen enough of that. Let's get Tucker Carlson on. He's always good value. And he actually went on Israeli television.
Do you generally believe Israel would try to harm you because of your opinion? Are you serious?
No country, and I say this with sadness, but no country has boasted more about killing its political opponents than Israel.
You were one of Donald Trump's most consistent and vocal supporters. You called on people to vote for him. What happened?
Yes, what happened was the war with Iran, which I don't believe serves the interests of the United States. I think it's destructive to the United States and to the world, but mostly to the United States. I'm an American. That's what I care about. And that's something he promised he wouldn't do. For 10 years, he argued against a war like this. And then for a variety of reasons, not all of which I understand, he embarked on it. And so I can't support that. My views did not change. His did.
Do you generally believe Israel would try to harm you because of your opinion?
Do I believe Israel would try to harm me?
Yes.
I mean, of course, I don't know. I hope not. I don't want to be harmed.
Yeah.
But my main interest is not
I'm
Israel.
not just asking you. You were implied to that when you spoke about your coming to Israel.
He's
Let's see
always
that for a
laughing.
second.
And I said to them, okay, I want to send you the flight information, and I want you to pass that on to the Israeli military just so, they don't mistake us for an Iranian drone or something. I mean, not to be paranoid, but again, this is probably the most violent country in the world, Israel.
So Israel is the most violent state in the world, even more than Iran? Are you serious?
No country, and I say this with sadness, but no country has boasted more about killing its political opponents than Israel, of course, about its assassination programs. The Prime Minister of Israel gave a golden pager to the President of the United States. I was there. And that golden pager represented the pagers that Hezbollah leaders were killed by. Sure. I mean, so yes, Israel brags about assassinating people, and of course it does assassinate people. Many countries assassinate people, but Israel makes a public relations campaign out of boasting about killing its opponents. So yeah, by definition.
These people that were killed.
Yep, the Pages incident in Lebanon is well known. Some conspiracy theorists speculate that when Charlie Kirk changed his view slightly, changed his tune on the Israel-Palestine issue, shortly afterwards his neck exploded. We're not making any accusations at all, but I can tell you that's what some people speculate about. Shall we listen to JD Vance? He's the second in command behind Trump.
You talk about bridging the divide. I mean, one thing that happened that hits, not quite literally close to home, but there was a very terrible shooting that happened today at a Muslim community center. It seems like 3 people are dead, plus the shooters. And, that community center is actually very close to this restaurant that Ush and I go to every time we visit. Her family lives in San Diego. She was born and raised in San Diego. Every time we go to San Diego, we go to this restaurant that is like maybe a 5-minute drive from this community center. And I found out about it actually on my way to the White House this morning. And I texted her, I said, would you have known anybody who was like involved in this? And she said, absolutely, I would have known some people, or at least their parents, who might have actually used the services at this community center. I don't know a single person who would say anything other than what I'm about to say, which is that type of violence in the United States of America is reprehensible. And I encourage every single American to pray for everybody who was involved and affected by it. We don't want that to happen in our country, and may God rest the souls of the people who lost their lives. The principle of religious violence is particularly disgusting, especially in the United States of America. And as a devout Christian, I would say it's one of the most anti-Christian things and anti-American things that you could do. And here's why. One, because a fundamental principle of all the great faiths is we are all children of God. And because of that, we are endowed by certain rights that are unique to our status as human beings. You violate those rights, most importantly, when you commit violence against another person. You can violate them in other ways as well, but the most profound way to violate the fundamental right of human dignity is to commit violence. But here's why the religious piece of it is particularly egregious. One of the fundamental American rights that I think came from our Christian heritage as a civilization is the idea that we respect people's religious freedom, in part because we respect them as human beings, but also because we respect their right to find their own pathway to God. You can't force anybody to a pathway to God. They have to, through their own free will, find God themselves. That's one of the reasons why that right of religious freedom is the very first right enshrined in our Constitution. So when you commit acts of violence, you're committing an act against this fundamental idea that people are created in the image of God and that they have the right through their own free will to find God however they might want. And as a Christian, of course, you might have your preference for how they find their pathway to God. They have to find that choice. And anybody who would commit violence against another human being in the name of religion is, I think, doing something that is a violation, of course, of the laws of man, but I think more importantly, it is a fundamental violation of the laws of God.
And Muleskin is calling him out. What SH this guy spews about civilian rights while condoning the bombing of children in Iran. Yeah, 100%. And we've got the horrific attack that happened in America. It would seem to be, it looks like a terror attack to me, but they're calling it a hate attack. But we don't seem to want to use that word terror when it's certain sections of society that are under attack. And of course, as you point out, the attacks on Iran, what can you call that? What do you call a double tap on a school? Is it because it's done by an internationally recognized military that it's not an act of terror, it's an act of war? And is that part of the greater plan for what's happening in the Middle East? Is that the end goal? And we talked about Jewish people being an ethnicity or being a religion. A lot of the argument in favour of what Israel has done in the region is that it's this act of self-defense. And JD Vance was mentioning that people should have freedom of religion, and that is enshrined in his Christian values. He didn't say Judeo-Christian values, but sometimes people refer to it as Judeo-Christian values. And Jewish people have lived in a minority community wherever they have been for thousands of years, 2,000 years perhaps, if we talk about the fall of the temple and the expulsion from the Holy Land. And Zionism was this idea of going back where they used to live. Among other people as well, other people lived in that region as well, not only Jewish people, but there was this idea of not being safe anywhere until they would all go back and live together in a majority Jewish country or a Jewish state. And is there freedom of religion in that country? I think there is. You can practice Judaism, you can practice Christianity within the Jewish state, but the Jewish state is not Jewish in a religious sense. It's officially a secular country, and the very religious Orthodox Jewish people, some of them, completely reject the notion of that state. But there is a concept that some people subscribe to of this one day becoming a greater version of the country that it is now. And I saw a map recently online of Sinai, the Sinai desert. After the 6-Day War, when Israel took control of the Sinai desert, not only control of Gaza and control of the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, they also had control of Sinai, that part of Egypt that is in the northeastern corner of Egypt, and it's technically part of Asia. Egypt is a transcontinental country, remember. Part of it is in Africa, and that northeastern tip in Asia, in the Middle East. Israel had control of this region until the 1980s, and it was given back in exchange for peace, apparently. But prior to that, there had been settler communities in Sinai, like there were in Gaza, until they pulled them out in, I think it was 2005, or maybe 2006, when they withdrew from Gaza, and all those settlers in Gaza went to live in other settlements in the West Bank. But there had been settlements in Gaza, and this is held up as some kind of evidence that look how much Israel is willing to give up, even though I believe it is illegal under international law to transplant your civilian population into war-won land. That is a war crime. So the settlements would have been illegal. Turkey is guilty of that same crime when they conquered or annexed, occupied northern Cyprus. They transplanted Turkish people into that war-won land. There were already Turkish people living there, but they added some more to solidify the Turkish identity of that part of northern Cyprus, and that was illegal. And it was illegal when Israel did it in Gaza and in the Sinai. But yeah, this withdrawal is held up as a kind of look how much we have compromised. In the chat, Muleskin is saying that the trouble is that this state was agreed before the Shoah, not a result of it. Okay, so some people will hold up events in the prior to and during the Second World War and the horrific persecution of Jewish people at that time as a justification of why there needs to be a homeland for the Jewish people. But of course, the Balfour Declaration was declared prior to that. It had already been put in writing. And Miss Spunny is saying, yeah, no one cares. They only care what Israel does. And we all know why. Would you like to elaborate on that? And if anyone wants to call me, or if you want to send me a voice note on WhatsApp, I will play it here. I will point the microphone and let your words be told without any censorship, but please don't swear. And the other argument that often comes up is, look at the Middle East, there are 22 Arab countries and only one Jewish country, or there are 50 Muslim countries and only one Jewish country. Can't Jewish people just have this little piece of land for themselves, even though people have been expelled from that land to make way for this Jewish state? And sometimes people contrast it with, there are loads of Arab countries, why not a Jewish country? Sometimes people contrast it with, there are loads of Muslim countries, why not a Jewish country? Well, is it a religion? Is it an ethnicity? Earlier on, the gentleman speaking to Piers Morgan described Jewishness as an ethnicity. But if we look, let's compare it to being Arab. Is being Arab an ethnicity? You can be Arab and be black. You can be Arab and be virtually as white as me. Some of the Lebanese and Palestinians are very fair-skinned people, and some of them have European or Circassian, Caucasian, Russian ancestry. Being an Arab means you speak Arabic. Arabic is your native tongue. It is a linguistic group. It's not a race. Being Muslim is a religion. Being Jewish is a religion, and it may be something more as well. I can understand how you can be of a Jewish background, of a Jewish heritage, even if you don't. I know it sounds bizarre because Judaism is a religion, but Jewish people, and you mentioned the events of the Second World War, Jewish people were persecuted not for their religious beliefs, but because they were perceived as different, because their community was considered other, or Untermenschen, as they called it in German. And that can happen to any community. You can be a victim of discrimination, prejudice, and ethnic cleansing, and worse, the minute the majority group or the group in power perceives you as different. Catholics and Protestants are the same race and they're the same religion, but we know that they can turn on each other. And Muleskin is saying, if you calculate persecution as a justification for annexation of other people's land, then former black slaves should be given the entirety of the USA. That's an interesting perspective. Ibrahim is saying Arab is a culture. Okay, yeah, it is a culture, but the Arab culture in Yemen is very different from the Arab culture in Morocco or the Arab culture in Iraq. You could be Arab and be any religion, and you could look different, and even the accent is very different from one end to another. But what is it that makes you an Arab? It's your language, isn't it? Muleskin is saying, we live in a multicultural and diverse world where people have been living and mixing for millennia. An apartheid state is the last thing the world needs. Yeah, I think so. And the other thing about there being 50 Muslim countries or there being many Christian countries, why can't there be one Jewish country? Well, look, there is a Jewish majority country, but the Jewish religion or the Jewish heritage culture, it was never an evangelical proselytizing religion. That's why, or that's one of the reasons why there are not loads and loads and loads of Jewish countries, and many